What is my honest opinion of the supposed best-in-class RXP-325, but importantly, through the lens of someone who actively loves the old riding characteristics where it was all about skill to extract the performance of the smaller machine? Well, today I'm going to give you my brutal, honest opinion of the RXP. As I said, the supposed best-in-class T3R racing hull. I must confess, it is pretty good. Is it old school good? The jury's still out. With me literally just being invited to Mexico by BRP, I had the chance to ride everything and spend a lot of time on machines, more time than I would normally spend on the likes of an RXP. I also rode machines like the Apex, and it was really insightful for me to understand how do compliant modern day skis turn. Throughout this video, what you're gonna get is someone who loves old school machines where it's all about rider skill to extract the performance, tippy machines, but performance machines nevertheless, against the modern day, and to just talk about it candidly. How does the modern day feel for someone that's used to small machines, and to give you guys an understanding and a balanced opinion of what the new does well versus the old and vice versa. So guys, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button and let's get into the video. Disclaimer, two-stroke fans are going to hate this video because I'm talking about the RXP-325, but I'll do it through the lens of I can't keep doing that voice. Guys, this video is me talking about the RXP-325. I spent a lot of time riding it, as well as the Spark in Mexico. Sea-Doo invited me. If you've been living under a rock, where have you been? Go watch all of these videos where I went to Mexico. Sea-Doo invited me, absolutely wild experience. And in that process, I spent a lot of time learning what that T3R hull is capable of, and to learn the good and bad, basically. So today, I'm gonna try and be brutally honest. In my opinion, the RXP on paper is an incredible machine. Does it represent me as a rider? No, because it's too big. I would call myself more of an agility-based rider where I want to jump on a machine and I want to use all my body input to feel as if I'm garnering the performance of the machine, not the machine is allowing me to be the capable rider. So I kind of just want to set like some baseline expectations here. At no point am I alluding to the fact that I think an RXP is as effective in terms of rider connection to the water as an older machine, or even a Spark for that matter. But I'm going to be talking about this objectively from the point of view of what it actually does really, really well, and why Sea-Doo have done a lot of stuff really effectively. So the RXP 325 has been out for a couple of years now, and as we all know, they changed from the T3 hull to the T3R. And they did that fundamentally by adding a new serration design on the underside. If you flip it over and actually look at the hull. Now, when they went to the T3R hull, I didn't really think a lot of it. I've rode the T3 previously, and in my opinion, it was good, but it just represented what I would call a compliant machine. Now, I'm going to break down compliance for you quickly. Compliance is when you jump onto a machine and the machine has been designed in such a fashion, so the hull of the machine, the ergolock of the machine, the handlebars of the machine, the power delivery, the footwells in terms of the gun wells, all of that stuff has been designed in such a fashion which it gives you ultimate compliance, almost like a modern day sports car. You jump in it, it's got traction control, it's designed to not allow you to spin out and crash, all of those things. Think of it that way on an RXP. You corner an RXP, and unless you're doing something fundamentally stupid, it's going to corner it the exact same way on rails every single time. So that's compliance, okay? In the 90s, we didn't really have compliance. If we had compliance, it was through extensive modding, things like ride plates, trim tabs, new sponsons, lots of stuff to get that ski to corner hard. Now, ironically, just a quick segue, when people modded the old X4s, they would turn comparable to an RXP modern day, but it wasn't out of the box like for like. Out of the box, XPs washed out quite a lot, so definitely weren't compliant machines, but that was part of the illuster. So that T3R hull, it was my first opportunity in Mexico to experience it firsthand. Now, I stole the RXP off of Aquadan, who's one of Sea-Doo's ambassadors, and I said, let me have a go, I want to have a go. I jumped on it and I just went full hooligan, mainly because there was a lot of Sea-Doo bods there, and I basically wanted to say, look, if I'm going to ride an RXP, I'm going to ride it like I stole it, basically. So I did exactly that. I turned that machine as hard as I could physically turn it while holding on, and that thing will do 67 miles an hour into a corner, and it will basically do it on rails. Now, yes, we were riding on glass, so it skews it slightly. When conditions become more challenging, yes, you're going to have to read the water. And ironically, that's when, if you've rode old machines where they're more about your movement and body position, you're going to have an advantage over a modern day. I still truly believe riding a jet ski should ultimately have have almost like a provisional on a car license. You should know how to look at a body of water, see how the water is moving, and know when you need to let off and add, or where you can cut and where you can move, how you can dip in. So I think all of that stuff will still be advantageous if you've rode old, but in these conditions it was glass, so you could basically go 70 miles an hour straight into a hard turn, and it gave me an immediate sense of someone who doesn't ride modern day machines, as in RXPs. I obviously ride my dad's machines, but that's an ST3. It gives you a level of confidence which you just don't get even on a Spark. They've designed it so well at this point that you can put it into a corner at 60 plus miles per hour and it will turn, and the best way to explain it is I don't think there's any real jeopardy that you're going to come off. Now, of course, once you go into the race scene and you're going side by side rub rails and you're racing against people and you're in those more adverse conditions, yes, more jeopardy is going to be at play. But in terms of recreational riding, I think the way that Sea-Doo have moved is, let's design a machine that allows people to go around a course and not feel as if there's any real concern or lack of ability on their behalf. Because let's face it, culture has changed, society's changed, not to make this a woke related video, but people by and large want to get second place trophies. They want to be great at something straight away. And in my opinion, Sea-Doo have done a great job of making a machine that just makes people feel invincible. And I have a lot of case studies to vouch for that. I've been at the lake before where I've been riding a stand-up machine or an old XP. And I've said, do you want to do a switch? Which is kind of what you do at the lake, right? You try and pinch someone's ski for a little bit of time. And most of them say, hell no, I'm not riding that. That thing's too hard to ride. And you're like, but you've just been riding an RXP, which is supposedly the best in class, which is kind of like the perfect way to expose the shortcomings. And actually, you might have spent £27,000 on an RXP, but it doesn't immediately elevate you to elite rider status. It just means you've got a really, really great compliant ski. Anyway, when I was riding the RXP, I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how fast I could ride that machine straight away. And that might sound like, well, that's a really good thing, Joe. Why that actually actively turned me off as a rider is if I can ride anything straight away really, really fast, it means that it's not asking anything of me, which means if I put another dude next to me on it, there's going to be very little difference. Yes, of course, I still back myself to outperform that person based on agility, strength, all of the above, but that person is going to be immediately elevated to a similar comparable standard to me purely based on the merit of the machine. Now that to me, there's something fundamentally wrong about that. Now you can argue that out in the comments. I'll let you guys get involved in that. Now, why is that the case? It's not just to do with the hull, it's also to do with the Ergolock system that Sea-Doo pioneered. Now, the greatest way to explain this, and Kevin Shaw actually said this to me, I don't think he created this, but he kind of recited it to me. I thought it was quite powerful. He said, you sit in a Sea-Doo, you sit on top of, I'm going to say the competitors, but it's kind of true. When you sit into that Ergolock system, it's almost like when you get a perfect fit glove. You pull it on, you go, ah. And you just sit into it and it feels great. And even that little wedge or a puck that you put in behind your ass, and you just feel like, I'm not coming out of this machine. Your legs hug under. It's almost like when you go on a really good roller coaster and you just feel like, oh my God, it feels so smooth. The best way to explain it, and I actually use this analogy, is riding an XP is like going on an old fashioned roller coaster with the old head restraint. And there was a skill to not smashing your head around and being able to endure the ricketiness of it. But that was the luster and the charm of those old machines. Now, some people hate that, and I get it. When you go on a modern day roller coaster, it's all smooth and the restraints are designed in such a fashion that they fit you lovely and there's no real discomfort to it, but it also loses some of its charm, and that's a little bit like Ergolock. Now, what I would say on Ergolock, in my personal opinion, I would advocate that on the smaller machines that I'm advocating for. So I obviously want a smaller performance machine. There's no hiding that. I've been telling Sea-Doo that for the last 5 years. I was prodding them saying faster machine. So I used to say faster spark, faster spark. I'm not saying that anymore. I'm saying faster, smaller performance machines, because what I've learned through riding that RXP for 2 hours is I would actually take a lot of the DNA from the RXP. Now, this is gonna be the point of the video where you'd go, bloody hell, Joe, this is a bit contradictory. The good things about the RXP is Ergolock is a safety system, in my opinion, which avoids you getting bucked off that machine in the aggressive fashion that you used to in the old XPs. Now, what I would say is I still was able to corner that ski and move my position, but in the high-speed scenarios, it locked me in such a safe fashion that I think There's no real rationale to not have it on any of the tiers of machines. Now, of course, yes, it goes back to that point again that the dude next to me is going to be locked in the exact same fashion. I think the issue, by and large, is down to the size of the craft and how long the hull is. So this is where I would say we get into the weeds of why is the machine so compliant. If I was to have a blank piece of paper and I was in a design meeting for the next generation of what the XP could become, the first thing I would do is make the RXP shorter. Why? Because the shorter a machine becomes, the more maneuverability you have over it, the less stable it becomes, also width as well, and the more it becomes about rider skill. So in my opinion, you can make the RXP more technical to ride without removing Ergolock. So although that sounds a bit counterintuitive, Ergolock, in my opinion, is now just a great innovation that Sea-Doo have nailed and pioneered. I don't think they should ever go away from that. I think they should re-look at the hull size. Now, it's kind of one of those things that when we think about an iPhone got really, really big, and then it came back in size. Because what they did is they worked out how to get all of the componentry into an iPhone, right? All of the specs and the hardware. And then the engineers mastered that, and then they brought that back down to a smaller package. I think that's what needs to happen with Sea-Doo over the next couple of years. They've nailed it. Now work out how to bring it back in the right direction. I'm going off on a segue here, guys, and I am going to make a dedicated video on my baby RXP Spark DNA video, so look out for that. But getting back to the RXP, when you're on that machine, the combination of the Ergolock, the angled foot wedges, the handlebars, the launch control, the hull, it just is a very pleasant machine to be on. And yes, although it's not technical to ride, in my opinion, and I respect that other people have a different opinions to that, it's a very enjoyable machine to ride fast and hard for a longer time than, let's say, for example, an old XP. And there is a beauty to that as well. And if you were in a theoretical scenario where I had 18 machines like there was in Mexico lined out all the time, there probably is a scenario where I probably would ride an Explorer Pro, which I know you guys are probably like, oh my God, because when you go exploring and you want to go through things like IDF, which is their new system with the reverse gear where you can push out all the weeds, really great innovation. Do I want it on a performance machine? No, because it's all about being a performance rider, but there is a time and place for all those things. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that I took away from the trip from Mexico, that actually it's not fair for me as an aggressive rider to be saying, well, everyone needs to ride aggressively. I understand. You mean, take someone like my dad, he's obviously my wingman, he rides me all the time. I understand he wants a machine that suits him, which is the ST3 hull. He really enjoys that machine. It gives him what he wants. Whereas for me, I want something more technical, and that's absolutely okay. When I was riding the RXP, I was constantly trying to get that ass loose. And one thing that I learned, which I kind of have to concede and accept, and I'm happy to hold my hands up and say I got it wrong, you can still ride that loose. It flicked around and it would do it. Yes, the whole time I was doing it, I was thinking, bloody hell, I'm doing this with a barge. It feels like a boat. And I don't like that personally. I like a sense of, oh my God, wow. If you've ever flicked an old machine or even a Spark to a degree, when it lets go and the connection and you break that surface tension, if you've experienced it, you'll know. If you haven't, you need to experience it. It's an absolute blast. When the ass of a machine lets go and you're in free spirit mode and you're flying, basically, that moment is just it's like almost like when you go on Tower of Terror in Disney. If you don't know that reference, again, you need to ride Tower of Terror. But that moment when you're in free spirit and you drop, that's what it's like when the ass lets go on a machine. So I was constantly chasing that. And I actually found that you could do it to a degree. Nowhere near like a Spark, nowhere near like an XP. I learned in that process, even with what I would have considered the technical performance-only machine, it's a one-trick pony, which I called it that for so long, I was probably wrong. If I owned RXP, I would still ride it in a fashion where I would flick the ass around. The caveat to that, as I said, is the whole time I was just a little bit irritated by the size of it. I just kept standing up and trying to move it, and it just felt so cumbersome. It felt like wearing a pair of wellies, even though they were really comfy wellies. It just felt really big. Sea-Doo are going to hate that reference because is the Gulfstream Blue 325 RXP. But the point I'm getting at is when we wear a pair of wellies, we recognize that they're big, but they're big for a purpose, to keep our feet dry when we jump in puddles. That's a really bad analogy, but you get where I'm going with that. The RXP is big and it's compliant because around the race course, people want to be quick, right? And I get that. What wins on a Sunday sells on a Monday. I get all of that. But the caveat to that is all of the guys that were racing the machines in the 90s, they demonstrated quite clearly. I mean, there's guys that won multiple championships on XPs and old Blasters and old Raiders. You name them, they've all been raced. So there's almost like this demonstration out there that Yeah, you can race with compliance, but you can also race with more technicality. Which one's better? It's a little bit like the argument of, is Formula One better now with all of the technicality involved? Or is it better when we had Ayrton Senna racing? In my opinion, there's a beauty to it. Obviously, it was far more dangerous, and we have to respect that. We don't want to see anyone get hurt, but there is a sweet spot, I think, somewhere in the middle, where you take everything that's great about new and you somehow find that harmony in the middle. And that was what I just couldn't get away from. I actually stopped numerous times and spoke to Tim and Dan and Christian whilst I was there, and I said, when I ride the RXP, it's got so much turning ability, but the one thing that lets it down, it's the biggest Achilles heel, is it's so big. And I would really urge anyone that's riding an RXP to ride an old machine and just imagine that size craft doing 60 miles per hour. Now, the other thing I would touch on here, and again, it needs to be a concession on my behalf, is there is no substitute to doing 70 miles per hour. And this is what I would say. This is like my flag in the sand, me drawing my battle lines. I think there is an argument to say that the RXP will always exist in the high performance category, because doing 70 miles per hour, and let's face it, that's conservative. Guys are modding those to 80. There is no feeling like the exhilaration of just whap and you're gone. That for me is a really exhilarating feeling. But, and this is the biggest but, it exists in isolation. You still need that smaller machine that does 60 miles per hour, but has the turning capability where it's more technical. So this is kind of what I'm advocating for at the moment, is you have the RXP, RXT, and what we call the performance line. You've also got the GTR X300. There needs to be something smaller, more technical, that sits in parallel to those, which is more technical, and it's capped at like 60 miles per hour. The guys that want to do 70 consistently, go by the RXP. From a safety point of view, you shouldn't really be doing 70 miles per hour on an X4 anyway, even though guys were doing it back in the day. In my opinion, the sweet spot for a smaller machine is 60 miles per hour. All of the crazy guys saying they want to do 70 on a Spark, you'd experience it once and say, not for me. I love pushing my limits, but even by my threshold, I don't want to be doing 70 miles an hour on a small scale. I want to do 60. That's a sweet spot for me. So my whole kind of mindset around speed thresholds is, having been in Mexico pointing and shooting that RXP and having that combination of the way it turns, let that exist in its own lane. I'm cool with that now. I've experienced it. Other little things to touch on, 325 versus 300. In my opinion, it's the way you get so that 0 to 60 versus the 300. I've spent a lot of time riding the 300. Obviously, it's the same 1630. They've done a lot of stuff with the new 325 with like the fuel mapping, and they've done lots of stuff, but it's fundamentally still a 1630. In my opinion, it's the acceleration in the way you get to it. Nothing negative to report in terms of, if you want ultimate performance at the moment on paper, it's obviously exhilarating, it's fast, but I can't help it, Sea-Doo are going to hate it. It just feels as if something's missing, at least from my stance. There was a lot of media there, and I spoke to lots of different people. I'm not going to name names, but certain people were saying the RXP needs to be bigger. Now, that shows you the battle that I have on my hands, guys, right? If certain people are saying the RXP is too small, you can see why Sea-Doo are maybe listening to, it's okay to make the RXP bigger. But all that I can say from someone that's rode pretty much everything at this point, the RXP is just so easy to ride. And I'm not going to change my sentiment on that, because it's what I experienced. And a lot of people want me to be slightly more friendly to the RXP, and in a way I have been friendly because I've said what it does great. But it's just, for me, if there's no jeopardy in a machine, you will get bored. It's not really asking them anything technically. And then I see the guys on the Sparks at the lake, and I can only go by what I observe. They're the guys having the fun, the spinning the machines, going around the course, smiling and giggling. Where I was going with that, if you're talking about bang for buck, the Spark is probably the funnest machine and the most technical to ride. If you looked at the way I was riding machines in Mexico, the footage speaks for itself. The technicality involved in the Spark versus the RXP is chalk and cheese. Even though the Spark is a slow entry-level machine on paper, I hate saying that out loud, versus the RXP. In my opinion, the Spark is the technical one out of the two, even though that's the performance machine, which is wild to me. Some other little things about the 325, the color, obviously it speaks for itself. That Gulfstream blue is phenomenal in person. I think Sea-Doo done a great job this year with actually bringing back colors that just hit right, but it's just not my speed, guys. I'm sorry. I would ride it and enjoy it if one of my friends said, Joe, do you want to blast? But would I go out and part with £27,000? Absolutely not. I'm still waiting on a machine which represents me more. I really enjoyed and experienced, and I can only thank Sea-Doo for the ability to ride lots of machines, because I also rode things like the Explorer, the GTXs, lots of different machines. And it was really insightful for me to get a more rounded opinion and actually come from this from an objective point of view. Still have that fundamental concern that machines are just way too big to to pull the right people into the industry. I think the people that need to come into the industry are the younger demographic, people that are more athletic, more physically able to challenge themselves. And I don't think putting them on RXP is the answer. You know, they're going to go straight onto an RXP, never really have to learn how to read the water, never really be technical. In my opinion, the PWC needs to get closer to its roots in terms of all about rider input, reading the water. Guys, I sound like a broken record at this point. So for all the modern day RXP riders, you got me finally. I've made a video talking about it. I said I never would, and I have. So yeah, Joe rode an RXP. He enjoyed it to a degree, but he's still left wanting more. So it's kind of like a bit of a win for me, a bit of a win for Sea-Doo, and for the high performance guys, they're definitely gonna take this and run with it. The Joe now wants an RXP, but it's definitely not the case, guys. As always, it doesn't matter whether I'm talking about new. The philosophy is always the same. Keep the classics alive.